Joseph's announcement that he was filing for divorce hit me like a thunderclap. It was a shock, even though I had always stood firm against it. Quinn, standing by his side, pleaded with me to fix things. I had always believed my dedication to Joseph and Quinn was unshakable. But in that moment, I started to question everything. For years, I'd thought that living together was a testament to our commitment. Yet I had hesitated about moving in with them for nearly 5 years. It felt like I had reached my breaking point. Eventually, I gave in to Joseph's demands, packed my things, and left. Joseph kept calling me. My name is Bella, and I'm approaching 45. Joseph and I had been married for 18 years, but there had always been something missing, a spark of passion. Even in the beginning, Joseph had shown little interest in romantic gestures, and I didn't feel much differently. We had 2 children, both of whom were already out of the house, leaving just Joseph and me. Joseph had a strong, often overbearing personality, while I was more easygoing. It wasn't always easy to balance, but I never minded his temperament. We'd been together since high school, and despite my doubts when he proposed, I eventually said yes. For the first few years of our marriage, I stayed home, taking care of the house as his parents had expected. When our child was born, Joseph's parents were thrilled, visiting often. Despite initially agreeing that we wouldn't live with them, Joseph later suggested we move in with his parents. I stood firm against this idea, despite our child becoming more independent as time passed. Every time it came up, I refused. Joseph would get upset, probably hoping I'd change my mind, but I never did. My resistance was rooted in 2 main reasons. First, I never had a good relationship with my mother-in-law, Quinn. After our marriage, she often called me over for trivial matters, and no matter how much I tried to help, she would complain. "You're late. Do you know how long I've been waiting? The TV's broken. Can you fix it?" At first, it seemed like small annoyances, but Quinn's behavior grew more aggressive over time. I'll never forget a family lunch when everyone was served sushi except me, and I had to eat alone at a diner. Quinn's hostility grew, and when I tried to talk to Joseph about it, he saw it as an attack on his mother and shut me out. That made it even harder to approach him with my feelings. Joseph's attitude toward me shifted after that. He stopped helping around the house, even with the simplest tasks. His mood soured, especially as I continued to resist moving in with his parents. It didn't take long before his behavior turned worse. He started staying out late, implying he was seeing someone else. "I'm going out for drinks with a lady tonight," he'd say, returning the next afternoon. This pattern continued for 4 years. No matter how much love fades, being treated like this by your partner is unbearable. I reached a breaking point, which didn't go unnoticed. Even my children started voicing their concerns. My friends pointed out how much weight I had lost, how tired I looked, and urged me to take better care of myself. I knew I needed to make a change, but taking that first step seemed impossible. Then, a chance appeared when a friend offered me a job at her flower shop. She owned the business and needed help, hoping it might lift my spirits. I accepted the offer. When I told Joseph and Quinn about my new job, their reaction was muted. "It's good you're working. We all need to pitch in," they said. Joseph acknowledged that we could manage on his income alone, but having mine would provide extra financial security. Quinn, too, made it clear that I was expected to contribute to the household expenses, but I made it clear that my decision to work wasn't just about their expectations. It was about me taking control of my own life for once. The job at the flower shop turned out to be a godsend. It didn't just boost my mood, it made others notice the change in me. People began saying I seemed happier, lighter. Being a stay-at-home mom had its own set of challenges, particularly managing Joseph and Quinn's constant demands, which often left me feeling exhausted and unappreciated. But at the flower shop, interacting with customers and working with flowers brought a sense of joy I hadn't felt in years. It gave me a sense of purpose, and it made coming home feel more like a chore. To avoid facing Joseph and Quinn, I found myself working late or making plans to eat out with friends. This went on for about a year. Then, about 5 years after we first discussed the idea of living together, Joseph confronted me. He criticized my increasing absences, my spending habits, and my neglect of household chores. He went as far as calling me lazy and redundant, accusing me of not pulling my weight. The only way he would overlook these issues, he said, was if I agreed to move in with him. I refused to back down, and that's when Quinn entered the conversation. She accused me of being in the wrong for not wanting to live together, and Joseph, instead of defending me, sided with her. The tension escalated, and Joseph threatened divorce if I didn't comply. Quinn, in turn, pleaded with me to take care of them. That was the final straw. I had tolerated so much over the years, but this moment was different. I stayed calm in the heat of the argument, but once it was over, I knew it was time to go. I waited until Joseph was at work, unsure of where to turn. It was then that I thought of my parents. I hesitated but called them anyway, unsure of what kind of reception I would get. To my surprise, they were supportive, especially my mom, who had always pressured me to stay in the marriage. She didn't hesitate to offer help and even said they'd come to pick me up. When I explained everything to her, she suggested I come over in a few hours. When I did, my parents were waiting with a large van they had rented to help me move. That gesture, so simple yet so full of love, made me feel deeply cared for. I knew I was making the right choice. That night, I packed up my things, and with my parents' help, I left for good. No sooner had I finished than Joseph called, realizing I had gathered all my belongings and was ready to leave. Joseph's voice crackled through the phone, full of disbelief and anger. "You're not seriously thinking about leaving me, are you?" he asked. I told him, calmly but firmly, that I was indeed planning to divorce him and had left the business card of a divorce lawyer on the table for any future communications. His response was swift and harsh. He demanded to know where I was and threatened to teach me a lesson. Although Joseph had never been physically violent, his tone was enough to make me wary. Despite the initial shock of him hearing about the lawyer, his anger flared again, stoked by Quinn's voice in the background. She suggested that Joseph could easily find someone else and should just go ahead with the divorce. Joseph tried to further intimidate me, questioning my decision and arrogantly stating that I would never find someone like him again before abruptly hanging up. After that call, I heard nothing more from him or Quinn, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a peaceful break. At my parents' house, where I worked at my friend's flower shop, I relished the time away from the stress. They gave me the chance to rest, and I enjoyed my mom's cooking and my dad's company, an invaluable reset. But it wasn't long before Joseph began calling again, this time enraged after speaking with the lawyer. He completely disregarded my request to communicate only through legal channels. It quickly became clear that Joseph was most upset because I had evidence that would work in my favor during the divorce proceedings. I had recorded conversations where Joseph hinted at his infidelity, expressing doubts about the marriage. A private investigator confirmed the affair, though Joseph vehemently denied any wrongdoing. He demanded proof, but the recordings I had made were undeniable. Surprisingly, after several days of animosity, Joseph agreed to the divorce, a decision that seemed to be influenced by Quinn's offer to cover the compensation fee. I was taken aback by her financial involvement, but I saw it as an opportunity to move the process along. With my lawyer's help, we negotiated a reduction in the compensation demand, a tactic often used to smooth over such matters. This adjustment allowed us to move forward more swiftly, bringing us closer to finalizing the divorce. Just as we neared the end of the process, a fresh wave of drama hit. Joseph, planning to move back in with his parents, walked right into a storm. He found Quinn in a heated argument with her father, Anthony, over her own extramarital affair. Anthony, who had clearly reached his breaking point, demanded they both leave his house, accusing them of infidelity. Quinn tried to deny the allegations, but her defense crumbled when Anthony presented photographic evidence of her with another man. Joseph, caught in the middle of the chaos, quickly denied any wrongdoing, dismissing the accusations as a setup. The argument was so loud and intense that it drew the attention of the entire neighborhood. A detail I learned from a friend who lived nearby. It was as if the universe was putting a cruel twist on the old saying that certain traits run in the family. Anthony, much like I had with Joseph, had meticulously gathered evidence of his wife's affair. He had hired a private investigator and had collected photos and emails that left no room for doubt. Quinn, unfortunately for her, wasn't tech-savvy and had failed to protect her email account, making it easy for Anthony to gather all the damning evidence. In a strange turn of events, Anthony and I found a shared experience. He showed me the photos he had used to confront Quinn, and they were as damning as the ones I had obtained of Joseph. The images left no question about the infidelities. My lawyer had always emphasized the importance of having solid evidence. It not only strengthens the case but also illustrates the irreparable breakdown of the relationship. Unlike Anthony, who had struggled with the decision to end his marriage despite knowing the truth, I was resolute. I had already mentally prepared myself for the possibility of ending my marriage. Anthony's decision to stay with his wife, despite the clear evidence of her affair, seemed rooted in the deep, long-standing bond they shared. It made me reflect on how sometimes relationships persist more out of habit than genuine love. While open communication could have helped prevent such a downfall, Joseph and I simply weren't compatible. Joseph and Quinn's situation deteriorated further. They were eventually evicted, forced to settle into a modest rental after their extravagant spending habits drained their savings. When they reached out to me for help with their rent, I refused. Having already divorced Joseph without receiving alimony, I felt no obligation to assist. Since the divorce, I made it a point to inform our mutual friends about Joseph's actions, which led to him being distanced from many. Our history together went back to college, where we had a wide circle of mutual friends. At a recent reunion, when someone asked about my current situation and Joseph, I chose to be open and honest about everything that had happened, prioritizing integrity over hiding the truth. After my divorce from Joseph, I learned that he and Quinn had begun borrowing money from old classmates, putting a strain on long-standing friendships. One mutual friend expressed their disappointment to me, explaining how they had lent Joseph a large sum of money due to their past bond, only to realize they would likely never see it again. This friend also shared their regret over not knowing the full extent of what I had been going through, wishing I had confided in them sooner. As word of Joseph's actions spread, I found myself surrounded by a growing wave of support, while Joseph became increasingly isolated. Joseph's financial troubles deepened, and I soon learned he was making late-night trips to supermarkets in search of discounted food. One evening, I ran into him at the store. I watched as he impatiently waited for markdowns, visibly frustrated, even arguing with the cashier for additional discounts. When he was refused, he stormed off. As I left, I overheard him in a heated argument with Quinn about their dire financial situation. It was clear they were struggling to make ends meet. The scene was unsettling, and I quickly made my exit, reflecting on my own life after the divorce. I had re-entered the workforce, landing a contract position that eventually led to a full-time offer. The job was challenging, but it pushed me to grow in ways I hadn't anticipated. Despite my initial self-doubt and the youthful energy of my managers, their support helped me thrive. Soon, I was being considered for a permanent position with better pay and opportunities. With my newfound financial stability, I decided to purchase a condo. It was a symbol of my independence and fresh start. The decision was also motivated by my desire to avoid awkward encounters with Joseph and Quinn, who I had often bumped into at places like Walmart. Though Joseph never reached out to me for reconciliation or financial help, I still couldn't shake the discomfort of seeing him again. I heeded the advice of my loved ones and chose a condo that offered distance from my past while still being conveniently located for my new life. The condo was perfect for someone living alone, spacious enough without being too large, and in a neighborhood with good transport links to downtown. It struck a balance between solitude and accessibility. However, about 7 months after moving in, I started to feel a bit lonely. I hadn't planned on remarrying, and the space was too small for roommates. During one of these moments of reflection, I spotted a stray kitten outside my apartment. At first, I thought I'd just wait and see if its mother would return, but when the kitten was still there the next day, crying pitifully, I knew I had to act. With the cold season approaching, the thought of leaving the poor creature out in the freezing temperatures was unbearable. After speaking with my building manager, who confirmed that pets were allowed, I made the decision to take the kitten in. The little furball quickly adapted to its new home. It would run to the door to greet me every time I came back, showing no fuss over food, and curling up in my bed on chilly mornings. I had never considered myself much of a cat person, but this kitten changed everything. I've become the person who proudly shares photos of my pet at work, constantly talking about how cute my feline companion is. My colleagues, good-naturedly, agree that my furry friend is the cutest of them all, and I find myself wholeheartedly agreeing. Fortunately, I have friends who are cat owners as well, so I never feel alone or overwhelmed in this new chapter of my life. They're always there with advice and tips, making the transition easier. Now, the best part of my day is coming home to my little cat, who eagerly waits at the door for me. This unexpected companionship has brought a new sense of joy into my life, making every day feel a little brighter and more meaningful.